Clarence Bartlett is no fan of Democrats.
Them blame Democrats and all them ticks has ruined this country, and we're trying to get it back.
Outside this Trump rally near Asheville, North Carolina, I ask him what's going to happen if Trump wins. His answer's a shock.
Oh, they'll kill him if he gets elected. That's how bad they are. They're the most evilest people I ever seen, lying to deny.
Who would kill him?
Well, the Democrats, the ones that's trying to cause riots and everything. It's obvious, it's in the news.
Bartlett isn't the only one predicting violence. Janet Stengel thinks it could happen if Trump loses.
Personally, I think it could turn into a civil war.
I think the Republicans are about as weak as they possibly could be in Congress. You have maybe 6 that are worth their salt. Ted Cruz, Mike Lee, Rand Paul, and 2 or 3 others. The rest of them are just the same as the Democrats. They've been there too long. They're establishment. They don't care about the American people because they're in their elite little tower. And so we're just sick of it, you know, and we're not gonna take it anymore. I see a civil war coming. I do. I see civil war coming.
So she named a couple names on the Republican side that are only worth their weight in salt or whatever that term is, and said they're all just like the Democrats. I would have loved to hear her name which Democrats are the ones that are all establishment and that only want to work for the establishment and their donors and don't do anything for the people. I would say AOC, people like that, and then get a chance to really find out who she's talking about. Anyway, that would be a follow-up question. Anyways, so she did say that oh man, you know, we need to start a civil war. Another question, how does that start? I always wonder this, how does that faction break up? We read all these, they don't, but people would read stories about the Civil War in America before and how that came together and how the factions broke up and what it was based on, and there's the leaders from this side, leaders from this side. Where would the leaders break up? Where would people then, I've asked this question, I think it was on TDR. So how does the Civil War start? Random lady in Iowa. Why does it start? And then who decides to just let's have this big battle in the middle of the country because you're upset? It doesn't make any sense, but anyway, that's beside the point. Grumbach then was asked a follow-up question when he was reporting about this situation with the lady there, and he had this to say, his reaction to how they're talking about civil war.
Is that an anomaly, or are you getting a sense that this is what some people all across this country are thinking?
You know, one of the questions I asked some of these folks were, do your friends think this way? Do your neighbors think this way? And they all said yes. And so I think it is really important to get out of Washington, get out of New York, and come to these places in the middle of the country where you are hearing a lot of this.
So you got to come to these places in the middle of the country to hear them say what we just heard them say. And then what? Is it convincing? Is it the majority of the country? Is it true that that these Republicans are all working with Democrats and they're all establishment? Why? Why do people, who's the people? Is it politicians? Is it media people? Is it people who live on the coast to come to the middle of the country and then stand in the middle of that rally and go, why? Then what?
Yeah, well, JR, you're assessing the correct problem here, which is coming both from the voter there and from the reporters too. So let me break it down. The first part of her answer is just a little bit longer video, but you saw some relevant section of it there. She starts out in a way that isn't wrong. She talks about how the majority of the Republican Party is the establishment and they live in an elite tower, etc. That's actually true. The Mitch McConnell camp, which is by far the biggest camp in the Republican Party, is not populist. They're corporate Republicans. But she misinterprets that because conservative media has led her to misinterpreting it as, hey, they're not working for who? Who do they logically work for? The people who sign their checks. No, they're not working for their corporate donors because everyone in right-wing media is financed by those same donors. So they have to trick her and say, oh, they're working with the Democrats. Now, by the way, that's not overly wrong either because there's a whole wing of the corporate Democratic Party is the corporate Democrats, and that's the largest wing of the Democratic Party. But who are they working with? Well, people like Charlie Kirk say they're all trying to end private property. Someone else in the right-wing circles in the news today said they're all trying to become communists. Why would corporations donate money to Republicans and Democrats to take away their property and their rights and their money? Now, do you think that makes more sense Or do you think it makes more sense that they gave them money so they could make more money by capturing the government and instituting crony capitalism, where both the Republican and Democratic corporate stooges work for their donors? That makes way more sense. But the right-wing media doesn't want you to know that because they get money from the same exact donors.
So what percentage of extremist murders in 2018 were perpetrated by the right wing? Well, the ADL, the Anti-Defamation League, did a study about it, and the answer is all of them. You heard that right. 100% of extremist murders that took place in 2018 were perpetrated by people who were driven by causes from the right wing. The Anti-Defamation League's annual report on extremist killings in the United States, released Wednesday, found that individuals linked to right-wing extremist movements committed every single one. So let's go to the graphic from the report itself. The extremist-related murders in 2018 were overwhelmingly linked to right-wing extremists. Every one of the perpetrators had ties to at least one right-wing extremist movement, although one had recently switched to supporting Islamist extremism. White supremacists were responsible for the great majority of the killings, which is typically the case. Right-wing extremists, and this is according to TPM's report on it, killed 50 people last year, mostly with firearms, making them responsible for more deaths in any year since 1995.
I think the guy that, if I remember that story right, that guy that switched to Islamic extremism was a Nazi before. So man, that guy had a lot of thoughts in his head. Anyway, and he turned on his fellow Nazis and killed them because now he had become an Islamic extremist. Oh, okay, so man, any of that fundamentalism is a dark, dark place. Now, by the way, now they didn't consider that Islamic extremism as right wing in this case. I just want to be clear about that. He's in that category because for most of his existence, he was a far right extremist. But if you think about it, what are Islamic extremists? And I know this will make the right wing's heads explode, but they're right wingers. In the Islamic world, they're not progressives. They're the right wing. They're fundamentalist religiously, which the right wing in this country is. I'm not saying the right wing in this country that are religious evangelicals are all terrorists. Of course not. That's preposterous. We're not simpletons like the right wing. It's not a black and white world. And just because 100% of the right terrorism that happened in this country in this year were from the right wing doesn't mean that a right winger is a terrorist. That's preposterous. Doesn't mean you should profile right wingers. We don't say any of the things that the right wing says about Muslims, for example. I'm just telling you that in the Muslim world, the political spectrum has the terrorists as the extreme right wing, and they are the right wing in their politically in their respective countries as well. So, but that's not the definition that the ADL used. ADL said that there had to be positive evidence connecting the murderer to an extremist group or movement, and that it had to be their primary ideology, okay? And by the way, another thing that should be noted is 42 out of the 50 deaths were done with guns, okay? And those are things that we talk about on the show all the time, which is there's too many guns in the country. So if you're a lunatic who's a Nazi/Islamic extremist, okay, you're gonna have a gun and you're gonna be able to use it against your other fellow fascists, right? And they all live together, by the way. You're gonna be able to do the things that happen here. Pittsburgh's Tree of Life Synagogue, of course, a guy who was driven by his anti-Semitism was an extreme right winger. The Tallahassee yoga studio shooting, that was a guy driven by his hatred of women, an extreme right winger in that direction. Parkland, Florida, if you don't know this, he was very clear. The guy who shot up that school was driven by his white supremacist ideology.